Hello, friends. On this glorious day in drink history, I have hospitality on the mind. Hospitality is a dangerous word, much too easy to take for granted as an on-trend talking point alongside sustainability or authentic or craft. Easy to talk about and easy to underestimate, but difficult to excel at and damn near impossible to master. Many of us are or have been in the hospitality industry charged with the task of showing hospitality to guests. But as I have come to discover in the very short time I've been interviewing people on this educational drinking show, hospitality isn't just an aspect of the bartending experience, it's the final frontier. And it's been the common theme of inspiration throughout most of the interviews I've done thus far. It's the current and perhaps final state of evolution of the cocktail and spirits revolution, with hospitality adding the fourth dimension of depth to the modern drinking experience. As such, perfection is subjective and determined on a guest-by-guest basis, with the potential to make a dent in the human condition for a lucky thirsty patron, or simply miss an opportunity as your guest sips on a perfectly balanced, soulless cocktail. I find great comfort in hospitality being such an important idea to so many influential bartenders, and it's a trend that I'm excited to see continue to flourish. Let's do this. This episode of the Educational Drinking Show is sponsored by Junipero Gin, which is the original American craft gin going back to 1996 and the pioneering work of Fritz Maytag, which also makes it the gin of San Francisco. At 98.6 proof, it's a bit stronger than most gins and perfect in your favorite gin cocktail. Good stuff. My guest today is Beau du Bois of the Corner Door, which is a sensational neighborhood bar located in Culver City, that charming little hamlet in Los Angeles where I recently took refuge for an extended weekend. Mr. Du Bois has established himself as one of the most influential bartenders in Los Angeles and was recognized as the Los Angeles Bartender of the Year by Eater in 2014, which described his drink program at the Corner Door as, quote, possibly the most underrated menu in town. When talking to other bartenders that know Beau, hospitality is the word that came up again and again, as this is an area where he inspires others, which was also a big topic in our conversation, which I'm pleased to share with you now.
Yeah, I live in West Hollywood, but I've been working in Culver City for the past 4 years, and before that, Manhattan Beach. It's a great part of Los Angeles, you know, the last little Zion of cool neighborhoods that are on the west side that isn't Venice, Santa Monica beach crowd.
Yeah. So we've never met. I'm really excited to cross paths with you. Apparently my brother's wife and your wife are in the same industry, so there's been some kind of crossover there, but definitely a name that I hear come up over and over in terms of the Los Angeles bartending scene. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to hear. I came here, I think like 9 years ago. Yeah. From Indiana, and it was between Los Angeles and Chicago. And when I came here, like on a whim on vacation, I was like, is the weather like this all the time? Do the women look like this all the time? You know, I met my wife out here, so she won't be too mad at hearing that. But yeah, the cocktail scene was had a little bit more area of opportunity than like New York or Chicago. And so I just felt like, oh, the weather and the opportunity is better, so why not?
Where'd you start 9 years ago?
So when I first moved to LA was in like a time where they were, all the ads for bartenders were, we want a young female good looking bartender, and that was everything. This was before like the craft cocktail kind of momentum or revolution or whatever. And so it took me the better part of a year to find a bartending job. And I was the last bartender hired at what was known as like the infamous Riot Hyatt on Sunset. And they were already had plans to go into renovation to become like this boutique new brand called Ondas, which is their international brand. And, you know, they were like, well, we're going to hire you, you know, we'll give you the happy hour scene. Nobody wants to work that. And I was like, yeah, sounds great. And then, you know, I just kind of like hustled and built that up. And then like the veteran bartenders were kind of like shaking me down from my shifts because I had built up the happy hour so much, you know, just using like little tricks that I learned in Indiana, you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the scene has changed a lot.
Definitely.
In
So,
9 years.
that was like maybe for 9 months at the Riot Hyatt, and then we closed it down to do this huge $50 million renovation to become the Ondas. And in between that time, places like the Varnish, Evely had opened up, and it was just the kind of like whispers and rumors of like craft cocktails, farm to table, all those kind of buzzwords that were birthed out of that time period. And when they opened the Ondas, they were like, yeah, where you want to hire this position, it's called mixologist. And I was like, yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds great. And I was already kind of reading and familiar. And so, I just kind of jumped in and took a page out of, people like Eric Alpern and Marcos Teo's playbook. And we went from there.
It's nutty. Like Los Angeles, I guess they're just getting a football team. So things don't happen too quickly around here. But you think about how much stuff does happen here and how slow food and beverage has been to develop here. I was working here about 10 years ago myself. About the same time you got here, I started bartending, but more wine. And we couldn't really sell anything other than Napa cabs. There wasn't there wasn't any adventure. There wasn't any real kind of exploration of wine outside of that. And the bar scene was really the same for us as well. It was all mainstream stuff, mainstream cocktails. And then it kind of felt like it started downtown, but this whole evolution kind of came out of nowhere. And suddenly LA was this hip, cool new place for cocktails out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, we have a huge advantage here, like we have seasons, but we have access to such great produce and such great resources almost year round here that it's silly to think that it took us this long to get to that part, But yeah, the culture kind of had to evolve and had to start somewhere. And when you say like downtown, places like the Varnish, 7 Grand, all those were, pillars of the start of all that. And then it just kind of bled outwards. And now we have cocktail programs in every zip code, at least 2 or 3, which is great, but it does change the challenge to be like a competitive cocktail bar.
7 Grand might be the comfiest bar of all time.
7 Grand. Yeah.
It's like an old hoodie.
Yeah. No, an old hoodie is, it smells like an old hoodie.
That's in the best way possible.
No, it's great. It's a fantastic place. I mean, those guys deserve everything, all the success, and it's beautiful inside and the spirit selection. And I haven't been to see this new little like Japanese bar that they're doing with I think they started like a year ago.
Okay.
But I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Every time I go downtown, I definitely hit 7 Grand.
So how did you really kind of hit your stride here and get onto the path that you're on and doing so well today?
David LeFavor, was opening his restaurant down in Manhattan Beach called MB Post, and that was another kind of Zion of a neighborhood that hadn't been tapped for craft cocktails. And so, he wanted to definitely be a food-driven place as he's such a talented chef. And that brought the people in, and it started as just like a humble approach of, guys in their 40s and their 50s with great dispensable income and lots of travel and culture still drinking kettle sodas. And, I think some bartenders would have been like, whoa, we don't serve kettle sodas here. Like, we're a mixology bar, but
is that your stodgy bartender voice?
Yeah. I need to like twist my mustache, but we just kind of like stayed humble and we're like, here's your kettle soda. And then when it came the opportunity to make something like an old fashioned or Manhattan, we just had a little showmanship and stayed very humble about it. And every once in a while they'd be like, all right, let me get one of those silly old fashions. And then like a week later they're coming in, they're like with 10 of their bros. And like, you guys got to try this drink. It's called an old-fashioned. And so I think for me, it started as just like a humble thing. Like, guys, like, you don't need to feel silly or embarrassed about not knowing about like the great culture and tradition behind cocktails. That's my job, is to educate, in a humble way, an approachable way, and make it fun. People are coming to decompress. They're not coming for a history lesson or to feel embarrassed about their lack of knowledge or culture or whatever. And so, we built that place up and it did really well. And the owners of Corner Door kind of recognized, they were like, it's clear that you love cocktails. Why don't you come and geek out even more for us in Culver City? And so I was like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And we did. And, the places like A-Frame, Old Fields, Alibi Room on that Culver kind of west area had already done the heavy lifting to create the culture. Whereas in Manhattan Beach, we had to kind of create it ourselves and then build on that. And so based on that, like it was the best time to open a bar that was cocktail driven, because people were walking in saying, can I see your signature cocktail list? And it was the first time I'd ever seen that. So but we still kept it like neighborhood and casual and just very approachable.
And what's inspiring you now?
What's inspiring me now? Right now, honestly, you know, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where now the market is a little saturated. There's cocktail programs in every zip code now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just open a place and be like, we're going to be the Varnish of West Hollywood, you know, and we're going to do only old fashions, Manhattan gimlets and martinis, but it's going to be classic. Now you got to offer something a little bit more, and it has to go even beyond just the creative menus and the funny names or the clever approaches or garnishes. I think now what it's got to be dialed back to is hospitality. You know, being like that as a bartender, you've got to demonstrate to people why you should spend your money here for this old fashioned as opposed to the next door, which has an old fashioned that's just as good. And that just boils down to being a bartender again. No more focus on mixology and being fancy, but just being a very good hospitable host.
Does it surprise you that you say that?
Does it surprise me about being a hospitable host?
That it would be such a priority, because it seems like such an obvious thing,
Right.
but it's not.
Yeah, no, it surprises me that there's, with some people that I meet or some bartenders that I'm training, that there's a need to say that. You know, I think that a byproduct of celebritizing and glamorizing what we do, we've forgotten about like the elemental, like just the service part of it. You know, it's fun to have a cocktail like on a magazine cover or to win an award, but at the end of the day, like, it's the guests spending money in your restaurant and having a great time and wanting to come back and spend their money again that like keeps your lights on. You know,
when you're working with your staff, how do you take hospitality from being an obvious talking point to a meaningful part of your guest experience?
With my staff, you know, I always am constantly saying, like, focus on the individual guest experience. You know, like, what can you do to make the experience more memorable? Like, what kind of subtle cues can you listen for? Maybe they're celebrating something. Maybe it's their first time here. And it's just about giving your staff the tools to surprise people with their hospitality. And I'm always stressing that. Surprise people with hospitality. If you have a reputation for making cocktails, if you have a craft cocktail menu or anything, you always paint a bullseye on your back saying, like, please come and watch how snobby we are. But it's like, just surprise people with how humble and hospitable we are. So, and usually that, like, we just work together in small little ways and figure out how to do that. And then it just kind of clicks.
What about categories of spirits? Anything got your attention right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for the past 2 years, Japanese whiskey is like, I've definitely been keeping an eye on that and trying to figure out, even though it's still like very, very pricey and worth it, but doing a cocktail is tricky with it from a price standpoint. But you know, I think now I'm just getting ready to do that. So, and always rum. Like, rum is just such an impressive category and versatile and probably endless amounts of expressions compared to any other category of spirits.
Any style of rum in particular?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a hipster bartender, rum agricole is always going to like catch my attention, you know, but it's just, it's like the perfect level of dry and fishiness and dried plantains and bright citrus tropicality that it's difficult to not drink rum agricole and feel transported to, you know, a white sandy shore.
It's a pretty transcendent spirit.
Yeah. And I don't think we invented that. I think it just kind of comes from the culture of it.
Rum is such a fun category, and I feel like it still hasn't reached that critical mass. It's that category everyone believes in and they're waiting for it.
Yeah.
And it definitely has its place, but it hasn't reached that potential I think everyone knows that it has.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be like low-hanging fruit when it comes to rum, and people, once they kind of feel like they have an understanding of it, they're just kind of reaching for that low-hanging fruit. But then when you start really exploring all those other expressions, then you've got like even more possibilities and way to put like rum cocktails into context for everyone. You know, from at my bar, like the one thing that I'll hear 1,000 times a night, whether it's rum or even gin, is, oh, I can't do it. You know, I just, that in college, you know, X, Y, and Z, drank too much, got drunk. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, let me do something for you. And I think it just requires like putting that extra little like level of hospitality and being like, what are you afraid of versus what are you looking for right now, and let's try to meet in the middle here somewhere and give you like something that's kind of will surprise you.
The most surprising thing that I've experienced from the interviews in this podcast thus far is gin being polarizing is still a thing. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I mean, gin, that would be the first time that I've heard gin be described as polarizing, but I can also see how other people would say that too. I think it's a context thing. You know, I think you really have to explore the spirit and the different categories within gin, you know, and try to put it into a better like framework so that you can understand and elevate the taste of the gin, but make it approachable. You know, don't just hit people with a glass of warm gin and be like, drink this because it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, you got to kind of help them, like ease them into it.
Yeah. I'm also surprised about LA. It seems like for the size of the city and metropolitan area, there's relatively few producers here of all kinds of spirits and beers and whatnot. But it seems like there certainly are people making things here, but not as many as you think would be here for a city of this size.
Yeah. I can only speculate on that. I mean, I think it's a space thing. You know, whenever you're making spirits, obviously you're going to require just tons and tons of space. Whatever the city laws, regulations are when it comes to distilling cannot be easy.
No.
But, you know, I think that's why a lot of people, at least from a space standpoint, are like spreading out to, you know, like Ojai and up north so that they have a little bit more room to stretch.
Yeah.
You know, there's no viable equation for making like a small batch spirit.
It's true.
Or distilling a small batch spirit. Maybe if you're rectifying, it'd be a little different. But yeah.
It is a weird city. And it's, you know, talking to people here, every time I ask somebody about, you know, hey, which bars should I check out? I'm getting a different list of bars, and I haven't heard of most of them.
Really?
So kind of going back to what you were saying, there's so many new bars popping up all over the city in unlikely areas. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, I actually had a conversation with Marcos Teo, like maybe 2 years ago. I was like, hey man, should we be worried? Like there's a lot of cocktail bars like popping up. Are we spreading this around too thin? But if anything, like I said, it's just refocusing like, hey, now it's available. Now we just have to be legit bartenders, you know, and be welcoming and inviting to people. And so if it's helping to circle back and focus on like the pillars of hospitality, I'm fine with that.
What is the bartending community like here in general?
You know, I've spent most of my time in LA as compared to other cities. So I don't want to compare in a way that would, you know, rub New York City wrong or Chicago wrong or anybody wrong. But I've never seen a more supportive community, you know, when it comes to individuals, you know, and it's most of everybody that is friends, they're making points to hang out with each other at events and communicating and RSVPing with things on that and traveling together. And so when it comes to the support system, there's always going to be like a level of competitiveness. But first and foremost, it really does feel like a neighborhood community where you can tap into a resource, ask advice, help look for other jobs, or help look to fill positions that you need at your own spot. Yeah, it's a huge resource to have it here in LA. And I don't know if it's that way in New York or Chicago, or if it's just like cutthroat competitiveness. But it's kind of a warming feeling being in LA and having that available to you.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like we were talking about earlier, we're going to this Dan Dunn kind of book event tonight, and a lot of people are going to it. And it's so cool to see the support and that there is this kind of idea of community here. Yeah.
I mean, Dan has been, you know, navigating the cocktail bar scene here in Los Angeles for I don't even know how many years. But, you know, he's a mascot and people love him, and they rally together to support anybody. You know, if it was a bar back at Evele, you know, or a bartender at 7 Grand doing the same thing, I think you'd see the same turnout. You know, it's just kind of one big family of people that just love to show up and be like, hey, good for you. Like, we all had to like navigate the dark to figure out the cocktail culture here in Los Angeles. So when we see people succeed, we're like, that's all we were hoping for.
What are some of the other bars here in LA that really kind of inspire you and resonate with you?
Yeah. You know, I'm a big, number one, top of my list is going to be definitely the Spare Room. Like, especially since Yale, Vinegroff has started bartending there. She is like a formidable creative force that I've rarely seen like something like that behind a bar. And she has the speed and the efficiency and the level of hospitality to back it all up. She's not just like a cocktail artist standing behind the bar, like forcing people to drink her creations. You know, she's got the hospitality, and she's got the speed and efficiency to kind of back it up. She's honestly like, if you were to like say Yale is a toolbox, it would be all sharp knives. Hopefully that's a compliment, Yale.
It's incredible how much she inspires people.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, she's incredible, and she's a hustler. Like she's probably like the hardest working bartender, man or woman, in the city, I think. Beyond Spare Room, let's think here. Anything that Gabby is doing right now, she's at Birch in Hollywood, and I just, from a creative standpoint and a recipe building standpoint, she is wildly intimidating. Just, I mean, all the drinks, you're going to be like, you just opened up my brain and poured this beautiful creation inside it, and I'm going to taste it for years. I love Gabby.
It's all about the ladies here in LA.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. That being said, Big Bar, Carrie Ha, like just one of my all-time favorite bartenders in the bartending community, and just, again, she's where creativity and reality meets the road, meets the intersection, you know, and she just, they have a great team, a family atmosphere there, and she's just tweaking it to make it as more legitimate and efficient as it can be while focusing on the great theme that they have there.
I hear action. This is our little HQ of the South, I think. People are rolling in, rolling out. It's exactly how we like it. A bustling center of activity. And where do you see the scene here going maybe over the next 5 years?
I mean, I hate to keep harping on hospitality, but I hope that the cocktail thing is the revolution, the focus on recipes and craft ingredients. That's never going to go away. You know, what I'd like to see it happen is become more refined and more chiseled. You know, right now it feels like Los Angeles is like this, like really muscular, like individual of cocktail ability. I would much rather see that person become really chiseled, you know, and refined, so that it's like, hey, it's definitely not going anywhere, but like now we're putting our claws down and saying like there's no chance that it's going anywhere, you know, and it's going to have to be a balance of great ingredients, great spirits, and great hospitality.
So looking at your own work as a bartender, how do you, if you will, chisel yourself? How do you measure success? How do you see your own development and continued evolution in this idea of hospitality?
You know, actually, I mean, we were just talking about Gabby. Gabby said something in an interview that I like read or heard, and she talked about how when she's behind the bar, you know, it's like an obstacle course, and in a very positive way, kind of like a sport. And she's the athlete, and at the end of the night, she's kind of going through in her head, like she's not thinking, oh, was that fun, or like how many shots of rum agricole did I have with this regular or anything. She's kind of like reflecting on like each individual guest experience and being like, that was good, that could have been better, that could have been better. And so for me, I'm always trying to like keep myself behind the bar as much as I can, you know, and be an example to my staff, learn from my staff as well, but also like just like Gabby, like focusing on how did each night go, how did each individual guest experience go, and like what could I have done differently to, you know, make it better, more memorable, or just high five myself and be like, yeah, they had a killer time.
It's so cool. It's so encouraging to hear about that perspective on hospitality, because it's something that you do hear a lot of bartenders talk about, but it seems like it'd be very easy to I don't know, just treat it like a talking point.
Yeah, you know, that's definitely what we're constantly focusing on at Corner Door, and it's just, you know, daiquiris. A daiquiri is a daiquiri is a daiquiri.
Yeah.
You know, like fresh lime and sugar and some rum, you know, but it's always going to taste better than next door's daiquiri if it comes with warm, inviting, memorable service.
And in terms of this idea of hospitality, if you have a bar that takes their making of drinks very seriously, but they might fall short in terms of hospitality, what ways do you see them typically falling short?
You know, I think that the definite like first symptom you see is just kind of miffed that there are even guests in the restaurant or bar, you know, and that they're not just in their own little world, like making drinks and tasting drinks or drinking drinks. That's kind of, it sounds weird, but that's the first thing you see is like, hey, yeah, we have guests here. Like, welcome.
Yeah.
And just kind of miffed by that. Any kind of guest request that offends the creative integrity of the mixologist. Can I get this mojito made with vodka? And just things like that. Like those kind of questions are always going to come up. Like nothing should surprise you when it comes to alcohol service. You know? Obviously you have to draw the line somewhere, but at the end of the day, your job is to like show them a great time. So I think like, just guests kind of ruffling the feathers of the bar team is usually the first thing I see.
Man, it's really cool. It's really cool. I mean, it's so easy to take it for granted, you know, and it's really encouraging to see that there's such an emphasis on it, and someone like yourself would still put that level of awareness to practicing something like hospitality.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's like it's a controllable, and that's what I'm always telling people is like, let's control the things that we can control and, go from there and just kind of help navigate and guide people in the right direction.
Have you done any fun beverage related traveling lately?
Ooh. I was just in New York actually doing an event for Discover LA, and it was really great. I haven't been back to New York in a few years, and that's a city that I always think is just kind of like one lap ahead of us a little bit when it comes to the development or progress of their cocktail scene. So it was interesting to be able to do an event in that city where people were coming to kind of taste a little bit of Los Angeles for a night, which was exactly what the event was. So.
Wow. I was talking to Aaron earlier about the difference between New York and LA. He says that he works way harder here, but his quality of life is somewhat better. He says they're just completely different from each other.
Yeah. I mean, New York, the obvious things are going to be people travel times are nothing, like driving while like drinking. That's not even a thing anymore, in New York, obviously. In LA, like, Uber kind of saved us and, reinvigorated the drinking culture a little bit, but you got to work here in LA for your regulars. You got people who are like, I live in Silver Lake, but I want to come to Corner Door because I read about the taco truck. But it's such a commitment. Because it's like, oh, do I Uber or should I drive and like not have a drink? But that's the whole reason I want to go. So there's definitely the hustle here in Los Angeles.
That was the problem when the whole downtown thing started to happen, because that was kind of pre-Uber, and I was in Hollywood, and if you wanted to go downtown, last call was always after everything shut down, and it was so tough. Yeah,
the subways closed at like midnight or like 1, and you're like doing last call, trying to get that last daiquiri in, and you just can't.
It's a bummer. It's an absolute
No,
bummer.
I remember. I mean, when we opened MV Post, like one of the first times I knew we had done something right was when people were like, wow, I don't have to go downtown anymore for an old fashioned.
Yeah.
But I think Uber started like 4 months later.
I didn't even know Culver City was a thing. This is all new to me. I didn't know any of this was even here.
Yeah, I mean, you have downtown Culver and the Arts District, which is like right over there. And then where Corner Door is in like A-Frame, Alibi Room, Hatchet Hall, it's all on like what's like Culver West, like just a stone's throw from Marina.
Cool.
So, really cute, up and coming, killer like sleepy part of town, but like in a sleeper in a good way. Like, oh, it's cool, but it's not super packed like Abbot Kinney.
And what's next for you?
What's next? I do like the idea of keep banging the Corner Door drum. The neighborhood has really responded well to the frequency that we're kind of like putting out, and we've kind of become like this bar that every neighborhood like secretly wants, and so I like to keep honing in on focusing on that, and also try to focus on replicating it into neighborhoods that don't have it and looking for other locations. I've got my eyes really focused right now on West Hollywood, and I would love to have a cocktail program that was designed for West Hollywood, like the Santa Monica Boulevard version of West Hollywood right there in Boys Town, and do like a great little cocktail bar that's approachable and kind of like, flip the script a little bit down there.
There's very few things cooler than a neighborhood bar. I think of a place like Bar DeVille in Chicago or Elixir in San Francisco, and this idea of bars that have so embraced the idea of serving a neighborhood. It's such a cool concept.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like, it's kind of like your house pants.
Yes, to go with the hoodie.
Everybody has their house pants, right? Like you come home and you take off like your work pants and you put your house pants on, and that's what a neighborhood bar can be. Is it's reliable, it's there for you every day. Usually there's a stool at the bar somewhere, because it's just that kind of place. the staff knows you and things like that. It's what you always kind of hope for, but it's actually harder to tap into it, I think, as like to execute,
Yeah.
from a proprietor standpoint.
Are there any things that you're mindful about in trying to achieve that effect of being a neighborhood bar?
I mean, first and foremost is to just listen to the neighborhood. Remember that, like, your product is a controllable as well. The creative menu, or your spirit selection. Listen to the neighborhood and just kind of listen to what they're looking for, and just be able to kind of see how you can give that in the best way possible. For Corner Door, the first thing that we did was I just used the feature board, what the items of food, drink items that we were featuring that day. And I would feature like different esoteric classics, like an American trilogy, or a Jack Rose. And I would just take note as to how people reacted to that, and that allowed me to determine, okay, here's now my fall menu. And it's based on every time I featured an American trilogy, it did really well, which surprised me. So now I'll do a variation of an American trilogy and just like hone into that frequency and just see what happens. And it worked, just a little experiment.
Being this kind of neighborhood bar, do you have a solid base of repeat clientele?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Do they evolve kind of with the bar as your interests change a little bit?
That is a really, really great question. Actually, no, that's fantastic that you said that, because that is exactly what happens. And it's so rewarding to actually watch it happen. Like, obviously I get to witness it happen, like with my own owners, who start out as a couple of old-fashioned drinkers and just like give the middle finger to anything that has Campari in it. But then like after like a few weeks or months together, and it's the same thing with guests, like, oh, I drink vodka gimlets. Yeah. Well, like here's a French 75. Like, let's try that. Let's go from there. If you don't like it, no big deal. But yes, absolutely. I'm looking at recipes of drinks that we featured when we first opened versus recipes that we feature now, and it's night and day contrast. It's like, and I love that, because we're just kind of like pushing the education and the culture forward, just like small and subtle and slow, but enough where like somebody who's been there for like 4 years can like keep an eye on it and see how it's progressed. That's such a great question. I love that.
God, it's so cool.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, one of the owners, like, he would have never drank a Negroni when we first worked together, but now he's like obsessed with it. And that's like his barometer cocktail. He'll sit down like at a bar, like when he's traveling, and be like, oh, Negroni. And he'll come back to me and be like, their Negroni was so weird, or this was different, or they used this or that. And I'm like, I got you. You have the sickness now. You're a nerd now.
You get the Negroni reports?
I get the Negroni reports. Yeah, no, and it's great. And then it's the same thing with the regulars, people who, they like, oh, here's a tea punch. That's really esoteric, like rum agricole cocktail. And they're like, oh, I had one when I was traveling in like, South America or whatever, and it was amazing. And they're coming back and they're all excited that they can share this experience with you. And I just feel like, I'm like, oh, you all have the sickness.
That's amazing. Well, cheers to that.
Cheers. Yeah, no, I love it.
Very, very cool. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. And I have a feeling we have some more adventures in store tonight. So
I hope so. Oh, yeah, absolutely. A few more of these, and we'll show up loud at Dan Dunn's book signing, American Wine.
I don't think you'd want it any other way.
No. We're going to burn this bookstore down.
Exactly. Let's do this.
Dan will be right there with like a glass of wine, or need be a cocktail,
or both.
Yeah, like this. Yeah.
All right.
That's the Dan Dunn I know.
Yes.